And welcome. My name is Russ Porteous, and I'm in cool Tasmania on a motorhome holiday at the moment. And I am joined by my friends Peter and Francis. So, Peter, welcome. Francis, welcome. Interesting episode of The Block. We're at season 19, episode 13. And this evening we're talking about the working from home office. Well, that was the brief, but apparently the judges didn't think so.
Yeah, this term kept coming out. They took it so literally. And so they said that, I think, in three of the rooms, they took the brief literally. And so as I was creating a work from home space, what the judges were commenting on is that they created, their sole focus was this space alone. And as we unpack this episode, to the detriment of it being multifunctional, like being used as another room or an entertaining area. What do you think about that, Francis?
Well, it's interesting because I spoke about this very topic at the home show yesterday about creating multifunctional spaces. That the brief was for this to have a working from home space, which means it needs to actually function as a working from home space, like a really good space to work from home. But that's not to say then that you can't have another element within that room that can then make it multifunctional as well. And I think some of them hit the mark on that. For example, Steph and Gianni, I thought, hit that really well. They were missing the sofa bed, but it still felt like you could sit there, you could relax, as well as it being a very good working from home space. There's no surprise that they won. They really hit the nail on the head with the functionality.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with that. And the key thing is a big difference between construction design and how you fit out or put a room together. There are things like, you might have a lounge suite in there that you actually don't want. Well, that's easy to change.
Correct.
The key things is what we talk about is what are the bones of the room, what can't change once it's in place. And there's a few things that were picked up that I thought were really interesting, but probably before we rush too far ahead, Russ, your industry deals with delivering water to places to save it from fire. We needed something quite the opposite this week. What happened that caused disaster?
I don't live too far from where The Block is being filmed at the moment, and they talked about cyclonic conditions or hurricane conditions. I can't remember when that was.
We laughed about that so much. When was it?
Because you don't live far away either.
Well,
yeah.
At the time, we were far away. I was in Washington, D.C. at this time, and my wife and I were going, I hope the kids were okay. And then I said, Tanya, they're okay. This was like 3 months ago, and we've had them at our place. Because as we were watching it, mine was going into real time. I'm going, no, this is back then. So they didn't say anything to us. So it was interesting what a bit of water and not tarping a roof does.
But I've seen outside shots of the show as they've been filming, and they've had tarps. So maybe some of the tarps were just misplaced and just allowed the water to accumulate in certain spots.
Yeah.
Can I be a devil's advocate? And maybe they just made it look like that for TV. Like there was a lot of, who was prepared, who wasn't prepared. And then Ash was like, she'll be right, mate. And then the girls were, it'll be okay. Was this really set up for TV? There was no cyclone in Melbourne. We don't get cyclones in Melbourne.
No,
so I wonder how much of it was really... I just wonder how much of that was, I don't know, especially for TV. Anyway.
It's interesting. We were just saying before that we've all been watching the socials about the show, and a lot of people are really disappointed in this season. And I read lots of comments of people saying, I'm not going to switch on anymore. I'm going to watch The Voice or something else. And so, there's a fine line between the drama of the show and the story. And what I'm reading from the people watching it is they actually want to see the renovations, but this one's more like Lego or Meccano, I think.
I'm hearing exactly the same, or I should say reading the same things, Russ. They're sick and tired of the drama. They actually want to see people, you know, building and seeing how they're creating those solutions rather than just seeing the room reveal. They're not actually seeing how it's coming together. They're just seeing the drama, like this week, all the water coming in and how many buckets did they use to save the water, and watching Ash lift heavy buckets and things. Well, that's what it was. So I think people are getting a bit tired of it.
Yeah.
Look, I've done heaps.
Maybe.
I've done heaps of flood jobs over the years. I've been in places where ceilings have collapsed. To me, I think they added a little bit of GST.
Oh,
yeah.
I like that
a bit of
term.
Mayonnaise.
A bit of GST, a bit of mayonnaise. Woohoo.
Yeah, a bit in there.
Yeah.
So let's look. Here's the key thing: is that during construction, the key thing, you know, and you'll know it, particularly in your business, Russ. I know, Francis, in yours, is preparation is, you know, 11/10 of everything. And so when you fail to prepare, as the old saying goes, prepare to fail. And so one of the things that does happen when you're on construction sites is you're all the time busy, but there are things that have to take priority, even if they're not sexy. And so, you know, if they did know that a lot of rain was coming, or heavy showers, as we'd say in Melbourne, well, yeah, make sure you tarp down. We noticed one of the builders, I think it might have been Building 3, they created an apex with a tarp. So there was, now that wasn't a big deal. It was when I was watching, why would you put tarps on an absolutely flat roof? It's gonna come in. So I actually wondered whether that was done deliberately.
Yeah. I'm going to be a cynic and say I reckon it was done for effect, because they kept talking about, that's all they really talked about on the show this week was the rain and who was prepared and who wasn't prepared. I think it was a setup, a little bit of GST and a little bit of mayonnaise to just grab you both in the same sentence.
Oh, can I tell you a funny story? About 20 years ago, I was invited in to come and participate in a forensic investigation of an insurance claim. And what we discovered is a young fella had bought a multi-story building in the Melbourne CBD area and was hosing a ceiling down so he could put in an insurance claim. So,
oh my goodness me.
Well, yeah. I'll finish off with a better one that was legit. I got called out in the reservoir area, and it was for a complete cave-in, double-story home, and the house had been repaid by the bank. People had left it. Everything was fine. What are the chances of this? There was some roadworks going on and pathworks, and what had happened, the workers are connected in to the water mains of this particular house, got to switch it off, and just left. Normally no big deal. What no one knew were the previous owners had a bidet upstairs and took it when they left, which meant that for a month and a half, water was running through the property, causing a complete collapse of the subfloor and the ceiling. So the bill was very, very high, 6 figures. So that does cause damage. So this week,
let's go on to the room reveals.
Okay, we've got to go from 5 through to 1. And why are we doing that?
Because that's the order that they did it today, and that was because Ash and Leah had a little bit of damage, but I don't know whether we can reveal. Oh, look, let's go with the room reveals. Let's start with number 5.
Okay, so that is Eliza and Liberty's home.
Yeah.
How much do we love these two girls, Russ?
We love the girls, but they miss
I love them. Yes and no. I'm going to. I don't think they missed the mark completely. I love how much they improved. The colours were really good, and I really disagreed with Darren's comment about, we need to see authenticity because they've got, you'd want to have real grass weave wallpaper. and they've got this print on the wall, and I thought, are you really looking at the market here? This is not Toorak or Brighton. The difference between an authentic grass weave wallpaper and what they had is about $400 a square metre, and it's like, this is not the target, in my view, to put in real grass weave wall. So I really disagreed with him on the authenticity.
In fact, he drove me insane all night. He drove me bonkers.
Yeah. I don't know where he was coming from, but I thought, if you're really looking at target audience, he lives in Sydney. I don't even know if he really knows what Hampton East is like, but it's not a real grass weave wallpaper, $800 a square metre sort of place. And those houses are not that market. So I really disagreed with him on that. I thought the colours were really good, and Shana said that as well. I thought that, and it was a really lovely spare room, because they did have the working from home space.
I think they had the same print as house number 1, I think it was.
No, as Leah and Ash.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show they're all shopping at the same shop, which might be freedom.
Yes. And literally, there's a Freedom 5 minutes from there. Not even that.
Sure, there is. That's right. So it was definitely used better in House 2 with Leah and Ash. But I think it was a bit try hard, because they're in 50s houses and they used a 50s print, but it wasn't actually an authentic 50s print. It was just an image of something in the 50s. It was actually the 60s. So it was all just really contrived, but I'll save that for house number 2.
Yeah. I actually didn't like the picture at all.
No.
I just looked at it and I've just gone,
it was on glass.
Yeah.
It wasn't even, it's actually on glazing.
Yeah, to me, it reminded me of something I would have seen at Burger King or Hungry Jack's when they
rebrand. Yeah, I remember Hungry Jack's.
Yeah, doing a whole bunch of work at different Hungry Jack's stores. And this is back in the day when they're putting all this stuff in. And I looked at it, I thought, this is Hungry Jack's. Why have we got this here? But one thing I've got to give the girls, I thought was really smart by them, is they actually had a consult with Deb from Freedom Furniture.
Yes.
So what they doing was reorientating their mindset as to what do we do now. And the quickest shortcut in anything is find someone who's really good at it and ask a million questions. And I thought that was the perfect way to actually start their week.
Agree. And if that was a resource that they were able to tap into, I don't know whether because they're a sponsor that's free of charge, or whether that's something they need to pay for. But even if they did pay for it, it was money well spent for them. And I think, if anything, it gave them a bit more confidence. And I feel that they needed that.
Yeah.
It's probably a good opportunity for us to just talk a little bit about what you do at White Pebble, Francis, because this is it's a challenge for me. I've got no idea when it comes to style. So perhaps you could just, for people watching, tell us a little bit about what you do at White Pebble.
So I can do that, Russ. I suppose there's a couple of things in terms of what we do. It's renovations and new builds, but with a really strong focus on forever homes. So it's a little bit different to what they're doing on the block, because they're trying to get the best bang for their buck in terms of what that renovation is going to achieve for them. We're looking at getting a lot of emotional connection to the homes that we're creating. However, when it comes down to style, in this instance, it's making the style reflective of the buyer and who's going to be buying it. So it's the target audience. And I suppose with the forever home, the target audience is the person that's going to live there, the owner. So that's you. And so it has to be reflective of your style. And so we draw that out of our clients in a way that we can make sure then that what we're creating for them is really reflective of their personality, and that their home is their life story. Here, we're not really creating a life story for the block. It's about creating a story that people feel that they can sit in and live in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So if you were advising the contestants on the block, what 2 or 3 bits of advice would you give them?
Absolutely think about the buyer. So the area that they're in, what these houses are likely to go for, who's likely going to be buying them. Is it young families? Is it couples with the intention to have children? Are they I mean, that will be the buyer for these properties. And you need to then think about what you know, what sort of age group are they? Are they going to be wanting something that is, you know, super on trend when you're looking at the age of the buyer? So I think that that's really important for them to think about who's going to be buying, so that then they can get that the functionality right, but then also around the styling as well. Styling is less important. I think Peter alluded to that before. You can take the sofa out. As long as the styling's important, because people can visualize how big a space is. Oh, I could take that sofa out and put this in instead. It helps them to see the size of a space. And that's why the styling and having something furnished is so important.
Interesting.
It's a really interesting follow-on. So in another life, sales and marketing manager of a building company, you go into a display home, they don't have XXL furniture. It's not massive. It's deliberately designed so you can actually contemplate what can fit in there. But when people are walking around, they need to know this space. And I've made some notes in another room that relates to that, as to why that's important. Now, as far as colour tones go, and I don't want to get lost with Lies and Liberty's room, I can't say that I really enjoyed the boldness of that sort of faux grass wallpaper. And here's why. When we're designing a property for market, and we're looking at colours, if you have bold tones and someone comes in and they don't resonate with it, it takes a lot more energy to go, now I have to change it. As opposed to variations of neutral tones, it takes no energy and builds excitement and goes, oh man, okay, so we've got a neutral, or we could go green, or we could go blue, or whatever colour. It's easy to add, but harder to take away. And so I don't have problems with inserts. I'm going to use the term insert. There's somewhere where you look and there's a little bit of a bold colour. But when you have whole walls that is just that strong, in my sales brain goes, this is going to be really hard if someone's trying to match furniture and it doesn't go with this.
I agree with you, Peter, because it was so dark. But I think when we're using, if we can use softer colours and colours that most people gravitate to, I think it's okay. I mean, you don't want to do baby pinks and things like that, but I think you can use tints of colour, but not have it so dark, because that becomes a lot more polarising. And I really want us to start talking about some of the other rooms, because I think it leads on from this conversation. Should we do that? If we okay, so if we're talking about colour, I'm going to really mix it up. Let's talk about number 2, which is Leah and Ash and their blue room. Now, Shana said she loved it. I thought it was horrendous. The blue was so awful. It wasn't a blue that I felt was calming. Again, their room is so masculine. Yes, they used the same cabinetry from last week, but again, it was so masculine. Bottega oak we might use in a wardrobe. We wouldn't use it as the main cabinetry colour. It's just too dark. But with the blue, I can't believe she liked it. It was just awful. So to your point, Peter, that would turn me off the house.
Absolutely. In fact, I wrote, so in each of the rooms, when the camera first showed it, I wrote down just very briefly what my feelings were. And with number 2, I wrote, feels too bold.
Oh, masculine was what I felt. Masculine.
Yeah, and I was just like, smash in there. And the thing is, when I walk into the room, like when we saw some of the colour palettes in the other room, and I'll describe my initial feelings, instead of walking in, it's like, and in this relaxed space, it almost felt like some of the inner city hotels where you walk into the lobby and it's just moody as, and that's exactly what it felt like for me.
But it didn't feel sophisticated. What was the word you used? Sorry, moody. It wasn't sophisticated. I just thought it was so amateur, that room. Everything about it. And I don't know if you picked up. Look, I know they had a rough time because they weren't prepared. Because I will just wing it. but the workmanship, they had amazing workmanship last week, and they're known for being really good with their quality of build. This week it was disaster. The edges of the shelves, they weren't even butting up to the wall properly. You could see chips in there. It was terrible. I thought that was the worst room this week by far.
And I
I
think
didn't
when you
think
make,
that they.
sorry, mate.
I didn't think they deserved to be equal last.
No
I thought they
way.
should have been definitely last.
Yeah, I thought Eliza, in fact, I was really surprised. Eliza and Liberty's room, to your point, Peter, I think whether you like the colours or not, it still felt a lot calmer than number 2, Leah and Ashes. And I agree, Russ, they should have been absolutely down the bottom with number 2. I'm really surprised Shana thought it was amazing.
The other thing I like walking into the room, it doesn't have to be a big room, but with the right palette in there, it can actually feel bigger than it is.
Yes,
but
they closed it in.
Yeah, they took a big room and made it feel smaller.
And
so I have a problem with that. And like I moved away from feature walls. So some of my clients go, I want feature walls. And this is on a place they're selling. And I'm going, okay, let's go with a variation on what we've got. Let's go for a tin.
Correct.
So we can, yes. So it's soft, calm, and it's what I call in sales is called a focal point. You walk in, your eyes drift in that direction. It feels like you belong. And that one, it's just like Pentridge, Bluestone, all the way around. The only thing missing, 6 numbers.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that I felt was just unbelievable with what they did is it was a 50s inspired room. That's when the sketches came up and we're creating a 50s inspired room. There was not one thing in there that even alluded to being 50s. And the most tragic thing, in my opinion, is they covered up the original 50s fireplace, which I think could have added a lot of character to that space. And they put a really bland, characterless marble fireplace in there. And it didn't even go with anything else in that space. I just thought it was such a mismatch, and they had such a good opportunity with that fireplace. So this 50s inspired room was nothing.
Did you notice that on the edge, was it a granite they used, the stone?
That was a marble.
Oh, it was a marble, yeah. It was a hard edge.
Yeah.
And so it was actually just sitting above. My brother was a stonemason. So I've seen what he turns out.
It was just shocking.
Top of the cup. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we can agree that no one's really happy with number 2, and I don't know what the judges were thinking. I really don't.
Isn't that what Dr. Phil would say? What were you thinking?
I don't know. Anyway, my notes just went forever on number 2. Yeah, so do we go back to number 4, or do we go to number 1 now? Well, I've totally messed it up, guys.
No, that's okay. Let's talk about Stefan Gian.
It's
really exciting you may not know about. Does anyone know who Tom Panos is?
No.
Okay.
You love a good question.
So Tom Panos is one of the best real estate trainers in all the country. He's an auctioneer of note. He's always on TV, and he was the one that got the boys the win on the block last year. Now, he announced tonight that he has been secured by Stefan Gian to auction their home. Now, as we know, the boys absolutely smashed it last year with the sales. And what Tom actually did that no one else on the block did last year was that he had pre-sales planning and training going on for months, way ahead of everyone else. And what he did was he found out what the average price was in the area last year. So it was nowhere near what they sold it at. He ran parties. So he invited guests. They did things on the block that people became warm to the property. What he was doing in the background was creating hunger. There was marketing going on when everyone else was just away doing whatever they were. He was at it all the time. Now, he lives in Sydney. He came down to Melbourne, went out to Gibson about 4 or 5 times, or Gisborne, should I say. And so he has been brought on to do Stefan Gian's place. Now, I know he's been out at their place a couple of times already. So I'm saying this to you. this place, with having him there, I would peg it for the win at the end already.
Oh, that's interesting because
early call.
well, I was going to early call it, and I thought I need to see a wet room first. I either need to see a bathroom or a kitchen. But based on what they've done so far, look, they messed up the first room, but they have nailed it since then, and it's consistent. She's more confident, I think, which is really nice to see. She's smiling a lot more. She's a lot more relaxed. But as I was saying earlier, it's the most functional room in every single one that was delivered this week. It's a proper working from home space. I can't even believe some of these rooms could be called a working from home space. They didn't even have power to these desks that were centrally located. So I think Stefan's yarn nailed it this week. It was soft, it was multifunctional, and it was consistent with the look in the other spaces as well.
I got to say that I love their working space. I loved that the panels or the doors could slide across.
Oh, yeah.
That really got me fizzing at the bung. I was like, that's insane. And then the TV in the middle, that for me, when I'm designing things, I'm working away to actually have a look at things on a bigger screen. I go, this has so many uses. So, you know, if you had young kids, they could go, like when you finished your work day, they could watch their TV programs. They may not have had a fold-out lounge, like bed. That's easily sorted. It's a quick trip down to Freedom and a swap. I did write, strangely enough, my first thought of it when the first camera shot was in, I wrote a bit plain. And that was just the very first one. I've gone, okay, this feels a bit plain, until they started to talk about it and reveal it. And then I've just gone, this is amazing. And in fact, there were some things in there I hadn't seen before. I don't know whether you had seen, Francis, exactly what they had, but it's in my memory for planning for future homes.
In terms of having that the reveal of the cabinetry go back, no, I haven't.
Yeah, I thought
in living areas, yes, or it pops up, so you can get special hardware that allows it to pop up, which would have been a similar thing, but it was a lot nicher with it behind the cabinetry. I suspect the reason that they didn't have a sofa bed in there is because the sofa that they had in that space was really quite curved, and it was actually quite small. It wasn't really deep. So I think that they've put that in there to create an illusion of space. Plus, it was soft with the curves of the sofa. If you have a sofa bed, they're a lot more blocky. And I just think it finished off the styling of the height of that room really beautifully with those soft curves and it not being big and bulky. And I suspect that's why she chose it.
Yeah, she's a very smart cookie. What do you think, Russ?
Yeah, I thought the room was pretty good. I really enjoyed that one, and that they deserve to win this week.
Totally.
Now, interestingly enough, I've been in your office, tons of times, Russ. Is there, like, I reimagine offices now because of the other work that I do, and you can have it quite corporate. But one of the things I notice when I've been in a lot of high-end companies is that there's this sort of hybrid model where it's still corporate, but they're softening the workspaces so that connection between work and relaxation, and even in terms of how lighting plans are set up, it's very different to just UV lights above. What do you think? Is it something that you could look at that and go, you know what, if we were going to do a remodel of our workspace, there's merit in that?
Yeah, interestingly, we're actually budgeting for a remodel sometime in the next 12 months for exactly those reasons. There's a YouTube channel, I can't remember what it is, but what the channel name was, but they did a review of the Salesforce offices. I think it was Salesforce in San Francisco. Pre-COVID, it was all cubicles. Post-COVID, it was kind of like lounge rooms everywhere, really, with a few desks, and it was beautiful. So I think they expected maybe a third less people to go and visit, but they actually found out that it was significantly more because it was such a beautiful space. So we work in a lot of modern offices in the Melbourne CBD, and this design trend of more homely is much better. I really like it.
And look, it's happening already in Australia. I mean, it's definitely been, I see it in the high-end publications for interiors in commercial spaces. Lots of greenery, green walls are the dividers rather than having, traditional dividers made out of other hard materials. But a lot of softer furnishings. And as you said, Russ, a lot more of this congregating together and spaces that are on lounges rather than going to a meeting room per se. So it's definitely a way to bring people back in, and it becomes more hybrid because people are often spending more time in the office when they are there. So they want these more casual spaces to be available. It's really big. Woods Bagot are doing a lot of it, actually.
Yeah, they've always been very good at that, actually.
Oh, they're amazing at it.
Which house?
So does that mean does that mean, Peter, that you're going into number 3 now? The
Yes,
corporate one. That was a really beautiful segue.
It was. Marty Fox said this about House 4. He said they are at the top of their game.
They are.
And I think I'm actually paying much more of all the 3 judges. Marty Fox is absolutely the most consistent, and he doesn't equivocate when he's giving his opinion. He doesn't start off one thing becoming something else. He knows the end game, and the other 2 are just flopping around, from one thing to another. So that's my opinion. House 3, Brett and Christy. What are your feelings on that space? Your initial feelings, Francis?
The very first thing that went into my mind when they had the drawing and that came to my mind, and it had a herringbone floor, the very first thing I asked myself was, is that floor going to run through the whole house, or is that just going to be in that room? Because if it's just going to be in that room, it's going to look completely out of place. So it needs to run through the whole house, I feel. But even then, I feel that herringbone in what is allegedly 50s homes, which I suppose they're not going to be that anymore, is wrong anyway. Yeah. So I was really quite surprised with their flooring choice. And I suppose the big controversy with them was that a good space to have an office area when it was coming in off the pool, which is also facing west, which means that room is going to get super, super hot. I found it quite clinical. Corporate wasn't a word that came to my mind. I found the sheers, there was too much white in there. I just found it was so bright, but not in a good way. The white in the fabric of the sheers was too clinical. The walls were clinical. I think someone described it as bright and fresh. I just thought it was clinical and blah.
Yeah.
The black desk.
They raised a lot of concerns about that room not being a 4th bedroom, and I tend to agree. That's the judges. So I think was that pre.
Was that one or number 1?
That was number 3. What are we on 3?
Yeah, we're on 3. I thought it was number 1 that they were talking about that, but I probably got it wrong.
No, they did.
3's the corner.
Yeah,
three's the corner. Yeah.
Yeah. So it mentioned in 1 and 3 that same issue, but the reasoning was different. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd be very concerned with only having 3 bedrooms in a house in Hampton East with just 3 bedrooms. I'd be very concerned from a real estate sales perspective. You definitely want 4.
Particularly when you're thinking about the size of the houses, that you'd expect that they'd be 4 bedrooms. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, Russ, in that area, the size of the homes and who's going to be buying them, they would want 4 bedrooms.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I was doing a home in Melbourne's East probably 15 years ago. It was a 4-year build, 160 square home with 3 bedrooms. That was really interesting. The master ensuite was over 20 squares. It was humongous. Each of the 3 bedrooms had ensuites. The girls' rooms, there was 2 girls' rooms. I think they were about 30 square meters, so they were of good size. But for this whole home and everything that it had there, it was 3 bedroom. What happened was as they were finishing, the owners had a bit of a financial hiccup. it took ages to sell because it was massive,
Three.
but there was nowhere to put an extra bedroom for the whole size of the place.
Wow.
And so it was, yeah, it was just, I couldn't believe it back then. But the thing that is really interesting, and it was Marty Fox that first brought up the bedroom issue, and he said it's opposite a bathroom. And so it can operate as a hybrid room, but they couldn't really do anything with it while it was all set out. Interestingly enough, we finished the place off at the end of 2020 in Glen Waverley, where we turned one of the rooms that was like a sitting room. We turned it into a bedroom that was opposite a bathroom. So it was the downstairs. They didn't have any other bedrooms. There's 5 bedrooms upstairs. But part of my reasoning and planning was in that area where there's lots of really good schools in that. You heard me talk about this the other week, generational homes, ground level. So, you know, the reality is we're going to have a lot of interest from Chinese buyers, a lot of interest from Indian buyers, love to have uncles and aunties. It's, you know, how the families stick together. And I said, if we turn this into a second master, which what we did, you will find that you'll have a lot more interest. And the guy who bought it was Indian background. He offered a 90K knockout bid once it was going, and he secured it. And he was Indian Malaysian, and he was bringing his wife's parents over from Malaysia to live with them, and that was a room they're going to go into, and that's why he bought that home, for that one reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I call it future proofing. That you're future proofing the space to make sure that it's adaptable for when, you know, things change within your family situation. And sometimes we can't predict those things, but let the floor plan be future proof. And look, to your point before though, Peter, I suppose if there's built-in cabinetry in there, it's difficult to change it around. Yep. But if they can take some things out, like, you know, sofa or whatever it is, they can change it around. They did have the built-in cabinetry on the back wall, which Darren really didn't like because they couldn't, it was off the space where the pool was, and it should have been more like a second living. And I agree, or at least not have so much built-in cabinetry that could be a bedroom, or it could be a second living, or you know, something a little bit more like that than a desk, or sorry, an office opposite the pool.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. So if we have
but
a look
again, sorry, go on, Peter.
We've got a
comment. Yeah, it's commented. It's probably time that comments leave the 50s vibe to Shelley Croft and keep the Reno focused on prospective buyers. That's some wisdom there.
That is a really good point. I only mention it though because the block made such a big fuss about this 50s thing, and I think we spoke about it the very first week. That's their marketing paraphernalia, and it's just because they were cream brick 50s villas. That's not going to resemble that, and they don't resemble that towards the end. So I think that is a very valid comment.
Do you think they can retrofit that room? Do you think it'd be easy to change?
From memory, they had the cabinetry at the back. They'd need to take out the furniture, but that centrally placed desk is useless anyway because they had no power there for a laptop. And that was in 2 of the rooms. Yeah.
Yeah, it's for those who may not realise, you can actually put power boxes through the floor. Now they're on stumps.
You can,
easy.
But they didn't do it.
No, easy.
They didn't do it though.
Yeah. One thing that was really interesting, the herringbone. If you notice, the herringbone ran all the way out to the door frames. Oh, sorry, all the way out to where the skirts should have been, and there was no border around it. And it was really interesting that when you have, because I only go back to it because you mentioned herringbone earlier on.
Yes.
When you open the door, if you're not going to continue with herringbone, and you open the door and you see normal floorboards, if that's what they go with, they may choose carpet. We don't know. I'm hoping they don't. So when you've seen normal floorboards but herringbone, it just looks awful. The other thing that I like, design-wise, is almost as a border around the walls, is to have a strip of timber of the same type, or sometimes a contrast colour, and the herringbone runs to that. it creates just a nice little fitted area. And
they
just
could get
ran
away if they did that.
Sorry?
They could get away with it if they did that, but I still don't think it would be the right choice. But the border definitely finishes it off more beautifully.
Yeah, and I just looked at that and I've gone, sorry?
Was it this house that also didn't have the architrave?
It was either this one or number one that didn't have the architrave, but that's a big mistake. They said it was a time thing, but that is a big functionality thing you have to have.
Oh, for sure.
In fact, even just to seal, because there's always normally a gap there anyway, just to seal it properly. Not that these are going to be sustainable homes, but yeah, they'll have to do that. Was it this one or was it number one? I can't remember.
Speaking of number one.
Yeah.
Speaking of number one, let's go to number one.
Kyle and Leslie. My first thought looking at that room, it's at a snapshot. When I first looked at it, I thought relaxed, homely was just that first thing. And then my eyes dropped on the chair. So you had the two sofa chairs, individuals. Man,
yeah,
how big your booty got to be to sit in those things? They were massive. And
too big.
Smaller space.
They did the polar opposite of what Steph did by choosing something soft and small to make the illusion of the space being big. And the other faux pas they made, which was picked up by, I think it was Shana, or might have been Darren, all the furniture was pushed to the wall, and that actually makes a space feel smaller.
Oh, insane.
So people feel if I put all my furniture to all the walls, this massive sofa that I've got, it's going to make it feel bigger. It's one of the first things I say to people when I go into their home. No, pull it off the wall and you'll actually create a sense of space. So those chairs were too big, placed incorrectly, and they just weren't right for the space.
Yeah, that would actually work in a massive room.
Yeah,
because it's a context. And here's a really interesting thing. I have a pathological loathing of those really big leather sofas that people sit back in and they watch TV and they've got the big arms on them, they've got the headrests. It's like someone pulled it out of a space shuttle that, stops them from falling back like that. And people love them because they're comfortable and they think they look chic and they look really good. But why is it they've always got them in a 10 square meter room? And that's what it felt like. It just looks ugly. It's just too big, and there's nothing sophisticated about it. And you pay a lot of money for something that looks less than spending less and having something that looks more.
The only thing they did do with those, though, even if you don't personally like it, the style was quite casual. And I feel that transferred from what they did last week, that casual feel, it was quite inviting and calm, really worked. So I think the style in terms of with the flange on the edge of those chairs and on the ottoman really worked to create a really casual feeling, but it was just too big. So it was just the wrong scale, which is what often happens. The scale was just wrong. What did you think, Russ? What did you feel when you saw that space?
I think I could just echo everything you guys said. The proportions were just a bit out for me.
And they got second place.
Yes, but I do like those chairs, Peter. Second, they got second.
Yeah. I think
do you like the look of them, or do you like the fact that you're talking about the leather ones, Russ, because it's about comfort for you? It's about comfort. So I'm guessing then, Peter, there's no Jason recliners at your house?
Not a chance. Not ever.
Not a chance in my house either. No chance.
It's like Bougainville.
Really? Yeah.
It's not that I love leather. I've done a lot of work with leather over the years, restoration work. I love the tactile feel of it. But a lot of them are bonded leather, and bonded leather is absolutely the worst in the world.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I love good quality leather that when we clean it up and we restore it, that sense of nice new leather smell comes back again. It's just, it's like new car smell. You never forget it.
I remember shopping for our leather furniture, and we spent a long time, and we went to all the big brands, and ultimately we found a craftsman who just makes furniture, and he turned out to be amazing. And so when you've got really good quality leather, really good quality build, it's fantastic. And people used to say to me, "Oh, it gets sticky and wet. It can be too hot in summer and too cold in winter." I don't find that. I think it sort of nestles up to your body beautifully. I love leather.
It's so interesting hearing you both talk about leather like that. It's really, really intriguing. And I think there is absolutely a difference between the really good quality, soft, supple leather than bonded, which is it's effectively plastic. But isn't it interesting, though, that none of them have chosen leather so far? It'll be interesting to see what happens with the living areas. I don't generally use leather. So I am the sort of person, Russ, that says cold in winter, sticky in summer. But I also feel that because they're trying to, style these places that makes them have a feeling and a sense of invitation into the space, soft furnishings will always do that in a better way, in my opinion. It'll feel softer. Yeah, so I think leather can be a little bit stark. It can be a bit cold, regardless of what the colour is. It is, yeah, foreboding. Nice German word there, Russ. So I think it'll be interesting to see if anyone does style it with leather. And it is just that, it's styling.
So probably the easiest way to understand it. So leather is a forever home product because it matches the style of the individual. But if you can go around Melbourne anywhere and find a display home, especially those that aim for the high end of the market, and if you could find leather anywhere in there, good luck. You just won't.
You won't. For the reasons probably I've just described.
Yeah, absolutely. And people have to imagine themselves in there, but it wouldn't preclude me having some leather furniture, but it has to be the right one. Correct. And so bulk and size. With this one, Marty said simplicity is marketable. And so in House One, he said simplicity is marketable. And I think he was spot on there. And what he was saying to them is that don't get too complicated. They've got a room that's a simpler room now, which is really functional. Darren Palmer said he's got good styling. These guys are good budgeting because I think they were a bit over
13K.
Yeah, it was very good.
13. Leah and Ash spent 37.
Oh no, that's insane. It's insanity.
That's a bathroom. What are they thinking? Anyway, I'm not going to digress.
But it is part of it because here's the thing: is that when we're dealing with clients, and it is a game. So when we work out the budget with the client, how much do we want to invest? Is the word we use. We don't use spend. How much do we want to invest? Well, if they've got 100K to invest, or 50 or 30, we look at how do we make the most change first? What are the big things that count? And we have hierarchy of needs. So we start here and we keep coming back. And so if we've got sufficient funds, we'll do those little other things. But it's interesting how people can fixate on something that's quite small, takes a lot of effort and costs a lot of money and isn't going to bring them a return. And so when you're spending
But I think that's a classic case in point is number 2, don't you think?
Absolutely.
That is the best way. They're not going to get a return on that at all.
Not a chance.
That's just sunk funds.
Yep. And so the key thing for me is bang for buck. What do we get? And so with these guys spending in House One, managing their budget, so they cooked it last week. We noticed that in her Commonwealth Saver funds that she's got this fund that's got extra money left over. They, as Darren Palmer said, they're playing the long game. It's when they get to the kitchen or the lounge living area, where it's the statement.
Correct. So, and that's where they're utilising their money in a better way than number
Absolutely.
2.
So we have a look at the final scores. So House 1, they got 26. Do you think that was a fair score?
I thought it was too high.
What, in your opinion, what do you think it should have been?
I think they should have been a third. I thought that I actually thought they were better than Christy and Brett, but I think Steph, they definitely needed to win. So there was just certain things in that space that didn't really do it for me, but that's okay.
22.5 for Leah and Ash. So they tied with the girls. I think you were
Could
right.
have been less than me, for me.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah,
they could have been less for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I just didn't get it. 24 for House 3, which I thought was fair for Brett and Christy. I think they put in solid effort all week. Their application to the task was really consistent all the way through the week, even though they had issues with stumps. I mean, untreated pine stumps in the house, seriously, and mortar falling off their bricks. Honestly, they would have. Channel 9 would have actually had a house inspection. They would have known this was already there.
Yeah.
So
that's part of the drama, mate. That's
it's part of the drama.
I love to get back to the storytelling here and the ability of the producers and directors and editors to get the story out. And I think that, that's the sort of thing that people are genuinely interested in, not the tit for tat kind of relationship stuff, but rather what are the kinds of hiccups and problems you're going to find if you're renovating a home. And in my home, we discovered asbestos in the eaves, and it was built in the 80s. That's a challenge. That's the sort of stuff I think people are genuinely interested in, and knowing how do they deal with it. And then as contestants, how do they respond?
If it was a magazine, I think Channel 9 have gone for more Women's Day than House and Garden. A bit more gossip and a lot less of actually what's going on. And I think they need to start bringing it back across again. The pendulum must swing back the other way.
My gut feeling is, based on and we started with this discussion about social media, I reckon that they'll be going back, the editors will be going back, because they would have done the editing for a lot of this a few months ago. They'll be going back and going, crikey, this hasn't worked. Quick, let's redo these stories again.
Yeah,
that's an interesting take, Russ. It'll be really interesting because they're seeing the comments like what we are. So, and it's actually really good that they can see the comments and they can actually make changes now if they want to. They can change the trajectory of how this is actually being presented.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to throw one more thing. I really enjoyed Marty Fox as a judge. The other two, they've lost their shine for me. I think they need a MasterChef refresh on judges.
I honestly think that Marty Fox has left them flat-footed. I can't see where Darren. What's the name of the other guy who's not there at the moment? Is it Darren or
Darren Palmer?
No. The other original.
Neil.
Oh yeah, Neil Whittaker.
Yeah, Neil Whittaker. He's coming back next season.
Yeah, he is. And I don't know whether he's back in again this season. Either they're going to have to go for having 4 of them. I think now that Marty Fox is in, I can't see how you could take him out.
I agree with your comment that the other 2 judges have been left flat-footed. Part of the thing I want to do on this show is let's judge the judges, let's judge the editors, let's judge the producers, let's judge the show. And I think that you've summarised it perfectly, Peter, that Marty's brought something special and new, and the other 2 have been left flat-footed. And let that get out to social media.
Oh, for sure.
But further to that, Marty's the only one. The other 2 are designers, and so is Neil Whittaker. So they're looking at it from a design perspective, and they will talk about functionality and selling and so forth. but Marty's already in that space, so he's totally looking at it with a different set of eyes. And it's almost like they need three different types. They've got a designer, they've got someone from real estate, and maybe they even have a builder or something, or a different profession that's a judge
tradie
as well. A tradie that then gives them a different slant as well. And, oh, this is a bit dodgy or whatever it is. But Darren keeps changing his mind. He changed his mind again about the
rafters.
Was it the rafters? He changed his mind again. So he's all over the place.
Apparently, and I'm not one for the rumour mill, but apparently there's been a bit of head bumping between Marty Fox and Darren Palmer.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
That would not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
There can only be one big dog, alpha dog in the room.
And there wouldn't have been that conflict between Neil and Darren because they're very different personality types. And Neil he's
affable.
I think and he's much more high end. You know, he was the editor of Belle and all those Vogue, and so he's in a different space. So I'm not surprised that Darren and Marty, if that rumor is correct, is if there's any wind in there, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But apparently Neil is not there because his partner's unwell. So he's taken time out to look after his partner, and that's the reason Marty's here. But it'll be like what happened on MasterChef, maybe, that, you know, they had someone come in and then they did a big refresh.
So we have a comment by Bright Agent. If you could read that out, Russ. Are you able to see that?
Do you want me to read it? You good, Russ?
Yeah, lost out, Russ. No audio. Okay.
No.
Would you like to read that? Yeah.
Okay. So it's former contestants Alyssa and Lysandra have their own head-to-head Renault show coming out very soon. It will be interesting to see how much it focuses on the Renault versus drama. That's an interesting comment.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I didn't realise, thanks for that input. Yeah, we still haven't got your Russ.
That's what I wanted to say. Be right have been fantastic at chipping in and
I
throwing
have.
in really valuable comments. So thank you.
No, that's really, really valuable. So House 4, our new darlings for a whole other reason. Steph and Gian. Look, first weekend, when Russ and I were talking, they were the villains up front. I did opine that I think by week 2, that would change and we would start to see a different
You
version.
did. You did say that, Peter. I remember it distinctly.
She said something really interesting tonight after that one. She goes where, what was the word she used, where sore winners, and it wasn't done in negativity, is that she's mindful of fellow contestants.
Yeah, she said I'm really happy to win, but I feel sorry. But you know, I feel sorry that for the others. So she cares about the others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that says so much. It's not win at all costs. It's win at all merit. By merit, we're going to win this thing. And her natural disposition to being organised is starting to shine.
Yeah. And yeah, well, her skill set as an architect, absolutely.
What do you think, Russ?
I thought, I know that it's almost at an hour now. Sorry, we probably need to wrap it up for another episode. But I thought that they deservedly won. Yeah,
totally agree.
So, well, we're looking forward to,
Pete, if people are interested in talking to you at Presenting Homes Australia, how will they find you online?
presentinghomeaustralia.com.au. It's got all my contact details there. You can find me on Instagram under Presenting Homes Australia, also the same on Facebook, and you can find me under Peter Karaglanis on Facebook as well.
Perfect. And Francis, thank you again for your contribution. You've been back-to-back home shows. You were in Brisbane last week, Melbourne this week. What was the subject of your talk at the Melbourne Home Show?
On Friday, I spoke about bathroom blunders and how to avoid them, which has also gone to Sydney and was at the Melbourne Home Show in April. And yesterday I talked about top interior design tips to create your forever home. So they both went really well, which was great. Good to see
Excellent.
so many people out at the home shores.
I was at
Sorry,
the home
Russ?
show.
Bathroom blunders one could have gone for 2 days.
Yeah, I did 6, the top 6. So, it was really good to see so many people out. Yesterday was particularly busy. So it was great.
So I was at the home show today, and the guys talking, they mentioned you. They said we had a fantastic one yesterday. Frances was there. And so
that's lovely.
I'll be seeing her tonight. I didn't shout
that's lovely.
But it was very heartening. Yeah.
What we should do is also talk about the fact that you've got an amazing podcast, Francis, that helps people navigate their own journeys towards interior design and their forever homes. Where could people find? What's the name of your podcast, and where do they find it?
The podcast is My Forever Home. So it talks about all the sorts of different things that I do talk about the home show, but that's in podcast format. That's available at the whitepebbleinteriors.com.au website if you want to grab it there, but it's also available wherever you listen to your podcast. So Apple, Spotify, all those ones.
Yep. Pete, do you have a podcast? You produce so much content. I'd be surprised. I know you've got a TikTok account.
Yeah, TikTok. Look, I get invited to do lots of podcasts and TV.
Come on mine.
I'll come on yours. I'll be happy
to. Come on mine. Yeah.
Why not? Let's continue.
Handshake deal there.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to thank you both for your contribution tonight. We'll be back next Sunday night. I've really enjoyed the conversation this evening, and I also really want to thank everybody who's watching either during the live stream or watching during the week. When we started this journey, we didn't really know how many people we were going to get, but I'm really grateful for everybody who is liking the show and sharing it amongst their friends. I'd encourage you to participate, throw in your questions, throw in your comments, let us know where you're watching from. So once again, thanks for our hosts, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Au revoir.
Bye.